Gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Why Didn't They Laugh? I'm your host, Owen Benjamin. I'm recording this from my basement because my wife is making bread and my baby is crying, and I need to get away from the noise. But I have a great show for you guys today. I did a show in Saratoga Springs at a winery, and so I cut up a bunch of interesting clips that we can go over almost like in a post-game wrap-up, like sports. Like, we're gonna do an analysis of why things worked and why things didn't work. And I'm also gonna try something new today. I listen to a ridiculous amount of podcasts, audiobooks. I read a lot of books. And so a lot of the things I come up with in my jokes are on this podcast that I don't really reference. I'm gonna start referencing. So in case you're interested in some of these things, you can always go check some out. Yeah, this, yeah, and the quality of the video isn't great for this show because I recorded it on my iPod, but it does a trick. But if you want to help the podcast and help fund the podcast, you can always go to patreon.com/WDTL because then I can get better stuff. And we are sponsored by Blue Apron. Blue Apron is a great company where they send fresh ingredients to your door with a recipe on how to make some unbelievable meal that you've never made before. And my family is addicted to it because you get so much hungrier and and you enjoy the food so much more when you get to smell it and make it and crush it and chop it and grind it. And it's great to do with your family because you talk and you hear the sizzle and then you take pride in what you eat. And Blue Apron just does a great job. And if you use my promo code blueapron.com/Owen, you get your first 3 meals free with free delivery. And I can't say enough about it. So blueapron.com/Owen if you want to get involved with some really fresh, incredible food that you make with your family. I noticed that the internet, they used to always call it the information superhighway, but I'm starting to think it's the emotional superhighway. Because I think people are trained to react emotionally before they think of anything. And I think that emotions are so much more powerful than knowledge. And it's really we're starting to rewire our brains based on video crawling on. Oh, sorry, my wife just tried to text me something. We're starting to rewire our brains into like this expectation of emotion. And this is the scary part. The negative emotions are the most addictive. I read about gambling, like Gamblers Anonymous, like people that are addicted to gambling, and they actually become addicted to losing, not winning. Cortisol gets released when you experience extreme stress. And I think that there's some quote I heard once that the only thing we lack in this world now is lack itself. That we experience so much chaos and so much adventure and loss and pain for our entire existence as human beings that we have this DNA, this structure that is always preparing and ready for war. And when nothing comes, you almost seek it out. And I think life is too short sometimes. I do it sometimes, and I always will do it. You know, seeking out war or conflict or an idea that really rattles your brain. But I think there's a healthy way to do it and an unhealthy way to do it. And I've battled this myself. But I see some of my friends right now really going down rabbit holes. And there's no right party or ideology, or there's no like answer to this. You know, I think we can all see people very pro or very against some party or some idea. And you can find an equal amount of chaos and conflict in that. And I think it takes away from the joy of life. Yeah, I just want to discuss that. All right, so why am I talking about this? Because this whole episode is based on assumptions. And the good things of assumptions and the bad things of assumptions. And as a comedian, the skills I've been forced to, pleasantly forced. I'm glad I'm forced. But I've been forced to learn some skills on how to navigate these emotions without engaging in the emotions, because then I would fail tremendously bad. All right, so I'm doing a show in Saratoga Springs, New York, at a winery. And I have all these assumptions about a wine crowd. I've done enough corporate gigs and enough gigs where the crowd is very wealthy and snooty and elite. And those connotations resonate with me with wine and also Saratoga Springs, which is a fairly wealthy area. It's about 2 hours south where I live. And they have a horse track and it's very and I do the show on the day of the Kentucky Derby as well. So I see everyone wearing these big derby hats and, so I think that I'm going to make fun of that culture. And I get to the show right before I go on, so I don't really have time to register the audience or look around. And it's packed and it's in this beautiful winery. And I open with some mistakes. Check this out. This is a beautiful winery. It's like a booze Narnia. It's just beautiful, just well done. And you guys are very good people. I never know what to say when people are smelling wine. Are you guys like those type of dudes? Where you're like, and it's like, what do you smell? It's like hints of sadness. Like, what? I don't know what to say, so I just say weird shit. I'm just like, it smells like a serial killer licking an envelope. And then just don't break eye contact. Okay, it sounds like that joke did fairly well, but it really didn't. When I'm like, are you guys those type of people? And they're audibly saying no. But I just spent an hour working on jokes about smelling wine. I had all these ideas and all these different tags for everything. And so you can see that I swore immediately to try and recalibrate my social class. I'm also wearing a suit. And I'm realizing that I'm making a series of bad decisions about this gig. And here's a joke about the hats. Today's Derby Day, which in Saratoga Springs, yeah, you guys watch it on TV and get dressed up. A lot of big hats. A lot of women wearing ridiculous hats. And I want to know, what does that store do the rest of the year? It's like, what do you guys sell here? We sell like insane looking hats for women one day a year. And then it started raining and I realized that it was a good move. Because the insane looking hats functioned as an umbrella. I have way better jokes. I was trying to write shit for you specifically. I'm trying here, guys. I'm trying to write jokes about Saratoga Springs, horses, and wine. Okay, I'm now recorrecting because they're not the big hat people. They're not the wine smelling people, and I'm in trouble. I mean, I'm getting laughs, but a lot of them are courtesy laughs, and they're starting to view me as an outsider and not really one of them, and that's death in comedy. If you're registering as someone outside their social group, you're gonna have a really hard time, because I do a 90-minute show here, so you're gonna have a really hard time maintaining that relationship if you're viewed as not one of them. So I start, and bear in mind, this comes from, I'm gonna plug a podcast I just listened to. I was listening to the Jordan Harbinger's podcast, The Art of Charm. Okay, there's a guy named Grammy Wood, and the title of it was Understanding ISIS. See, some people wouldn't listen to that. I was so drawn to that because I despise ISIS. Despise. I see them as an existential threat to my culture and my way of life. So, but I'm drawn like a moth to understanding monsters, to understanding something that I don't understand. Like, I don't understand jihad, you know? And so I listened to this episode and it's fascinating, you know? And in no way are they defending them, but it's the understanding of them. Because, and I heard another great podcast with Jordan Peterson, who I'm sure I've talked about him a lot on this podcast. I'm a huge fan. And he was talking about how you can't be a whole person unless you understand that you're the monsters inside of you. that he didn't that he couldn't truly be honest and truthful as a person until he knew that inside of him was the capability of being a monster. And that's where a lot of PTSD comes from for warriors, for soldiers, because they do these insane things in war, and then that identity doesn't match their identity at home, and that's why they're in this state of like detachment and anxiety and stress. And so I love that. And in that quality allows me to know so many more types of thought and so many more roots and emotions, and I'm not just in one ideology. And I probably would have been that way if it wasn't for my career as a comedian, because I can't be stuck. I'm 5 minutes into this show and I'm being perceived as an other. So what else was I was gonna plug one. Oh yeah. So I'm listening to Sam Harris's podcast with Douglas Murray, who I've heard that he's a racist over the years. I've never even pursued him because people always said that he was a white supremacist and all this stuff. And I heard him on Sam Harris, and I realized why people think that. It's because he wrote a book called The Bell Curve, which is about human intelligence. And he showed the data that different groups, racial groups of people, have different levels of intelligence. But it's kind of tough to explain. It's like you almost have to be smart enough to understand that it's not a racist statement. And okay, he was the president of Harvard. Like, this dude isn't a pseudoscience quack, and he was wrestling with even revealing this data. It was only one tiny bit of his book, and it got him blackballed for pretty much life as being a Nazi. And this is when things get even more interesting. I haven't ever read Mein Kampf, but I'm pretty sure actual Nazis wouldn't reveal that Ashkenazi Jews are actually, they average a higher IQ than white people. And so do Eastern, there's a type of Chinese person. And you know, there's different races. And then people get so offended that they call them names and racist and all this stuff. And his whole point was that you can't judge somebody based on the group. It's the individual. The bell curve of the individual is so huge that you can never label anyone based on these findings, but it's something it's just data. And I read another book last year, I think I talked about it on one of the episodes, called The Sports Gene, where I think the author's name was Epstein, where they analyze, like, when you see how many winners of marathons are from one part of Kenya, not even Kenyans, one little area, you start wondering if there's a genetic component. And then also sprinters are from one part of Jamaica that are just, you can't really say causation, but when correlation is just mathematically ridiculous, like smoking and lung cancer, you can never truly prove causation. But when the correlation is orders of magnitude big, you can start making assumptions. And it's interesting that book didn't get that person blackballed, but the other one did. And they're pretty much making similar statements that, like, there are groups of people with genetic traits that the very, very outliers, not all Kenyans are marathon runners, not all Jamaicans are sprinters, not all Ashkenazi Jews are geniuses, but it's ironically, it's a rejection of science to be against that. And so that's when the waters start getting muddied. And that's when you realize there is no right group or right side or right ideology or right political party, that it pretty much is a series of principles that we need to live by, and that's the only way to navigate corruption. Because in my lifetime, and especially in my parents' lifetime, I've gotten to witness corruption switch sides and parties and all over the place. There was a time when my parents met teaching at a Benedictine college, and they were Christian, and they still are Christian in a way, but the corruption of the church and of religious people in the 700 Club and a lot of these people that were just such hypocrites and used this beautiful thing to oppress people made them reject it. And then now we're starting to witness a shift where now secularists are using similar rhetoric where, are you a science denier? Do you deny? And I'm starting to realize that it's not a matter of what group is right. It's what corruption and power can do to human organizations. That you take this beautiful story of Jesus or the Bible or the Torah or Buddhism or a lot of these things that have ancient knowledge in them and humility and values and morality, and you can literally use tricks to skew it into hatred and into exploitation. And religion has been falsely blamed for most of human wars. Like, I don't like that when I hear that, because that isn't true. Stalin was an atheist. Mao was an atheist. Hitler had no interest in religion. Like, it's when people aren't objective, it all falls apart. So here's when I start getting the crowd back. And I'm talking about this because that quality allows me to do this, because I'm registering data. I'm not saying this crowd is wrong for not laughing at my big hat joke. I'm saying I misread the crowd into thinking that they would like something that they didn't like, and now I have to readjust, or else I'm not good at my job. And I think people are so just apt to not allow their fragile ego to be shaken when data that is presenting itself is shaking it. It's like when Caitlyn Jenner endorsed Donald Trump, it shook people because those things didn't match up, and then people couldn't really, like the extreme left who was like, woman of the year, bravery, all that stuff. As soon as that happened, everyone just kind of froze and just they couldn't allow it to pass over them. These movements, these gender movements, or these climate change movements, or all these movements are not attached to a political party, and they never will be if they're done properly. Like, if you truly believe in trans rights, you should believe that they should vote for whoever they want to, because trans rights and political parties don't go hand in hand. And we've seen this. It's just like with the corruption of religion versus science. We've also seen that with political parties. Like, you've seen Republicans and Democrats switch sides and values several times over the course of American history. And so I think that what we should be watching out for is manipulation of values, of people, of resources, of freedom, of size of the controlling body. These are the only things that we can really register. Okay, so this is how I get them back. You learn how to drink in towns like that. You learn how to drink in towns like this too. All of upstate New York just drinks. And it's a skill. It's a skill that's good. Like when I first moved to Los Angeles, you'd see people just blacked out. Maybe it happens at Skidmore. Do you guys know what that is? I'm really trying to be local, and you guys aren't appreciating it. It's a liberal arts college nearby. It's like $60,000 a year, and every class is like vagina studies. You get to choose your vagina shape. It's a good time. It's called it's babysitting for adult children. The kids don't gots to grow up no more. I went to SUNY Plattsburgh where people were like, fuck you, yeah, right? They're like, don't talk shit or they will hit you in the face with a hockey stick. And Skidmore, it's like, you have safe spaces where there's no hockey sticks. Cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. All right, you see what's happening there? It's a class issue, and it's a values issue, and it's a culture issue. That a Okay, the Democrats and the liberals used to be the party of the working class, and now they're not. The working class is not associated with the Democrats or liberals at all anymore. And that does not mean they associate with Trump or necessarily the Koch brothers, or it's just they just don't like those elite people. 8 out of 10 of the richest counties in America voted for Hillary Clinton. And so these people have developed a resentment for the wealthy. Skidmore is a college I almost went to on a lacrosse scholarship. And I visited there and I realized I had nothing in common. All the kids were rich. All of them came from money, and there was, I have no problem with rich people. I have a lot of my best friends are rich as hell and they came from money. But in general, the culture of the extreme rich requires a lot of pampering. And what's happening now at these liberal arts colleges is they not only want to be elite as far as money, they also want victim status. So you look at Yale and Harvard and Princeton and a lot of these places, some of those kids are still just very smart. That's why the Skidmores of the world are much worse, because a lot of them aren't even smart. They're just rich. And so what they want is they also want to feel oppressed, because just being rich isn't enough. Like back in the day, rich people just were rich, where you were almost kind of a dick, and you're just like a dick. And there was more honesty to that than now. A rich person is claiming victim status as some sort of identity politic, because they also want to feel like, the people clapping in this have to work. Their hands have blisters on them, or they are from a culture that elevates hard work or elevates ingenuity and doesn't care about race or gender. That's the irony. And I'm not going to go too far into that because I'm going to stay on point. But these are all factors into getting laughs. Like, you can see that people started clapping at that. And if people say that's white privilege, you're out of your mind. You go in that parking lot, you're not seeing the same cars you're seeing at Yale at a protest. So, people have seen enough Bernie Sanders bumper stickers on Mercedes cars to, people aren't stupid. We're not as easily manipulated as the people, the corruption wants us to be manipulated. All right, here's a joke that worked really well for these people. All marriages, but, one time I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, how have you been married to Dad for 50 years? The dude's, insane. And she just goes, I can't shovel the driveway myself. And I look at my dad he's gonna be pissed off. He's like, dude, I got a niche, man. I'm rolling with this niche. Get a niche. Okay, that joke is a killer for this audience. That joke would not do well in an elitist audience. If I'm doing that same joke in a very wealthy part of New York City or an industry showcase in Los Angeles, they wouldn't get it. They wouldn't get that a lot of times marriages stay together through periods of fighting and darkness and lack of sex and anger out of need. And I think that's one reason why the divorce rate in Los Angeles and in a lot of entertainment and a lot of the wealthy is so much higher than the middle class, because they can afford to just be bored. They can afford to be like, well, I don't know if you're fully, if my whole being, they call it conscious uncoupling and stuff like that. That doesn't occur to a lot of these people. There's people that are in relationships with real abuse. Not trigger words and stuff, hitting. And they still stay together because a lot of times they have to. And so that is a socioeconomic joke. And one problem we're seeing with Hollywood is they're so rich that a lot of the comedy they're putting out is comedy of the bored. And that's why there's a detachment from it, because The Onion did one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It was a coal miner saying that he can't believe he would never have voted for Trump if he had only read this 800-page essay on queer feminism first. It's just because it's not that the rich are bad or LA are bad. It's just what they want to mock isn't what these people want mocked. They don't have time or resources to debate 70 genders. And that's why I have these strong opinions about this, because it is a class issue. It's a money issue. You know, calling people white trash or trailer trash is so horrifically derogatory. And the same people that in one breath will be like, oh, a bunch of trailer trash voted for Trump, will be offended by the word retarded or, you know, oriental, when they just compared a group of people to garbage because they're poor. Like, the hypocrisy is so deep. Like, there's a show out on Comedy Central called Problematic now that they just did a rap about cultural appropriation. All right. It got 7,000 thumbs downs on YouTube and 200 thumbs ups. Like, people like hate it. But yet the executives and the people in charge of this machine, it's the life they lead. Like, when you are really rich, and they're all rich. I'm rich in a way. Compared to the average American, I'm rich. But like, I have a blue collar spirit. There's one reason why I left there. I couldn't not work. Like, I couldn't live in a bubble. I was suffocating because I knew from my childhood, and I knew from just traveling the country doing stand-up in cities that people don't vacation in, that I was living a lie. And that that cognitive dissonance was causing me so much depression that I literally had to leave. And I ran to a field to shovel dirt, like literally. And so, but a lot of these people don't have that emotion. So what happens is they truly believe that, like, okay, like the best comedian for that group is Louis C.K. And the reason I say he's the best is because he's brilliant. Like, Louis C.K. is one of the best joke writers who's ever lived, in my opinion. Like, 3 of my favorite jokes of all time have been by Louis. And, but he's also like a critical darling in LA because his problems are from being a wealthy single dad who kind of hates his ex. He's like full of like hatred and depression and money. And like that just like anger, that'll jump cultures, because anger and just resentment can like Dave Chappelle is great at that. Like, you can jump cultures. Like, Chappelle moved to Ohio for the same reason. Like, you can't write jokes in the capital of the Hunger Games. You just can't do it. And we're starting to see like these people not even acknowledging that the masses of people want nothing to do with those jokes. Cultural appropriation is a ridiculous concept. It's only a concept if you have so much white guilt because you make $100,000 a week is what these people are making. You know, like John Oliver owns an $8 million house in New York, and he's just criticizing tax breaks, and we know it. We know that they're the richest people that we see, and yet they still are like, cultural appropriation. If you really think about cultural appropriation, so white people can't do rap, okay? So then black people can't use the microphone because a white person invented the microphone? Can Neil deGrasse Tyson still do science even though science was a European concept from the Enlightenment? That's racist. Cultural appropriation puts people in the box of their race, and it comes out of white guilt from being too fucking rich. And anyone that isn't rich doesn't really have those feelings. Like, most people I know do not think about white guilt. They don't, because they don't have that much. And so their life isn't based around like justifying their hoarding of resources. You know, like I was making fun of Emma Watson on Twitter about how the gender neutral award or whatever, which by the way would only hurt women because men blatantly get more interesting roles in Hollywood. Like, it would just be men winning every award. Like the Joker from Batman versus The Devil Wears Prada. Like, who's going to win that objectively? But anyway, I said like, I said something about how she was complaining about wage equality, or someone was like, yeah, she fights for wage equality. And I'm like, I know, right? Like, that bitch makes 1,000 times more than a teacher, right? Like, crazy. Like, what a rich asshole. And just silence. Like, because it's cognitive dissonance. They don't know how to react to that. Because she is the 1% of the 1% of the 1% telling everyone else why they're wrong because they have a penis. Like, It's so stupid. But people like get involved in hierarchy systems. Jordan Peterson is so good at explaining this. Listen to the last Joe Rogan with Peterson. People get involved in these social hierarchies, and some are based on merit, like a meritocracy. Others are based on identity, like your race, your gender. Like rather, if you're a lesbian black person, you get to have an opinion, and a white male doesn't because of power dynamics. Like that can't last. That is a Ponzi scheme. Because it will eat itself. It's chaos. The symbol for chaos is a snake eating itself. And that's because when you see Black Lives Matter shouting down Bernie Sanders, the closest we've ever come to a socialist being president, you know there's no end to it. That like then the black lesbian won't be able to speak if there's a black lesbian with one leg. But then that one leg black lesbian won't be able to speak if someone around who's also blind. And then you start almost seeking groups of people that, oh, and it's also racist. It also makes it seem like black people aren't as capable of white people, which they fully are. There is no difference with that. That's one point that Douglas Murray made, and one of the reasons he was called racist. He was showing bell curves that, like, you can't possibly prejudge a race based on anything because the crossover is almost 100%. Like these bell curves, it's like there's been so many Jewish Nobel Prize winners because like it's same with Epstein, you know, like it's the same with the sports gene book. It's like the elite of the elite of the elite of the elite, that little tiny fraction, that's when you'll see differences. Well, you'll start to see trends. You'll start to see that like being in a group that has some sort of genetic abnormality, like that little place in Kenya or a certain type of Ashkenazi Jew that just has this like ability of understanding abstract concepts like Einstein or people like that. It's just reality. But that doesn't mean that if you take a Jewish person and an Irish person, put them side by side, the Jew's going to be smarter. In fact, there's almost no difference. Like, I mean, statistical difference. Like, it's just not there. All right, so anyway. And it's a liberating feeling to know that. That's the opposite of racism. I'm not part of the groups that are the smartest. So why would I push this information onward if it was about power dynamics? China has 2 billion people. And according to Murray's research, they have a slight advantage in IQ, like scores and some stuff. It's just like, and he's only been proven right over the years. He said this in '94 just based on results. And he's not Ashkenazi Jewish either. He's not praising himself. We'd have no problem saying black people can jump higher, like the extremes. But for some reason, when there's ever white involved, people just shut you down. And that will only lead to actual racism. Because when people can't discuss honestly the reality we live in, we start constructing false realities. And that will lead us vulnerable to an authoritarian takeover. All right, let's get back to comedy. This was pretty interesting. This is funny. So I'm doing a joke that isn't really working that well, but something magical happened. Like, I'll just get drunk and start trying to high-five the moon and be like, we're never gonna die. Other people are like, we're all living in chaos. I'm like, don't drink. Did that offend some of you guys who are like, I'm a dark drinker? I fucking like it. Sometimes you gotta smash a plate to let everyone know you mean business. That couldn't have been more perfect. It's almost like I was like on a string and it just was like, if the joke doesn't work, do a plate breaking sound. Yeah. How crazy is that? Talk about statistical improbabilities. Whew. Like right as I'm not doing the best and talking about a plate breaking, a plate broke. I don't know if I have mind control or if that is just one of the coolest things ever. All right, here's something I'm working on. I'm done with my preachy section. And I think, yeah, is there anything else I want to discuss? No, that's my preachy section. But it's not really, like preaching, the commitment to realistic thought is, I'm not ashamed of that. That's all I'm saying. All right, so which one's this? What do we got here? What's emotional fighter? All right, let's see this. One of my buddies is a professional fighter, and I told him, I'm like, dude, you gotta come out to Celine Dion. Wouldn't that scare the fuck out of you? Like if you're fighting a dude, it's like, every night in my dreams, you just see this animal crying. Ah! Fuck it, I'll finish the joke. There's 5 people that are like, that's totally true, and the rest of you guys are like, just finish. Yeah, I think there's something there, I just don't know what. That's one of my new mysteries. Like, how do I make that Celine Dion joke funny? Because I find that really funny, but if people don't laugh, that's the answer to that. Oh, here's me making fun of them for judging me. Because one thing about audiences like this, it's almost like the white Apollo, where like, if you don't come at them, like, they won't respect you. Like, if it's deserved. And so this is more in the beginning of the show when I was being judged. So I came at them. You guys are awesome. Took me a second. I think you didn't like my suit. Because at first you guys are like, fuck this guy. Why isn't he wearing mesh shorts with a boner like me? It's because I'm a 36-year-old man at work, and I thought it was to show respect, but apparently you guys felt like it was an insult. But I love you. Yeah, because it's true. Like when I first went out wearing a suit, I realized that it was a bad call. Because there's certain crowds where when you wear a suit, they're like, finally, an adult. And other crowds where if you wear a suit, they're like, queer. Okay. Here's some successes. I've been doing this lisp joke now for years, and it's never quite hit. It'll get a laugh from people that like to think about comedy. There's a bell curve for all these jokes, but I finally got it. I finally got the wording. Check this out. At this point, you're wondering if someone intentionally put the letter S in the word lisp to fuck with people with lisps. Of all the letters, lisp, like you can't say it if you have one. Is that intentional? But don't say that out loud. Keep it inside, because she's gonna think. Yeah, I know that's small. That's not a punchline. I mean, it's a punchline in a sense, but it's part of a bigger joke. But I always wrestled with that because I would say, you're thinking about whether or not someone put the letter S in the word lisp on purpose. Like I would say something like that. And some people would laugh, but a lot wouldn't. I think I have to really spell it out. Because I think it's an abstract enough concept where I have thought about it so much that my brain's like, oh, that's obvious. But if you haven't thought about it, it doesn't quickly register unless it's described better. And there's another example of this that I finally figured out. I've done whole episodes on Summer of '69. It's a song joke I do. And how good it works if I do the original first is mind-blowing. This is the first time I ever tried this. Watch how good this works. Because this joke also would lose half the audience. Half would dig it, half wouldn't. If I spell it out by connecting to the original first, watch this. No, it's like, Jennifer's real six string, I'm a looking fine and dime. Remember that song? Straight to my fingers, baby. Was the summer of '69. Right, and that song's about reminiscing. That was actually originally a different song. It went, I made my first real black friend. We were working in a mine. He was cool, but I think I gave him typhoid. Was the summer of 1869. Me and the guys from church got the flu, so most of us died. I needed milk, so I took my horse 100 miles, it was a very bumpy ride, yeah. When I look back now, the Civil War seemed to last forever. We weren't given a choice, they made me fucking shoot my brother. But those were the best days of our lives. Oh yeah, back in the summer of 1869. Yeah, like you can see that works, and it's because that joke is a risk, and you can clearly see where the risk takes place. It's right after I made my first real black friend, because contrary to social media, white working class people are not actually the racists that we're perceived to be at all. In fact, if I'm about to say something about black people in a room full of white working class people, they're uncomfortable that I may say something racist. They're not happy about it. Like, there isn't this drive towards racism that people think. So when I say I made my first real black friend, there isn't a laugh there. There's never a laugh there. He was cool. There's a little bit of relief. I think he gave me typhoid was the summer of 1869. So at that point, you register, oh, okay. The race is almost irrelevant. The whole point of that was that the slaves had recently been freed, so there probably was a time in human history when people started making their first black friend, and then the typhoid it amplifies the stakes of the time, because we complain now about the carpal tunnel syndrome or being gluten free. Back then there was like basically if you got a certain type of flu, you're dead from a horribly painful thing. So from just drinking water, and so then that release is so big, it's cathartic. And then, but if I play the original song first, it's what I'm talking about from the beginning of this podcast, that there's an emotion there that sets the table for parody. Was the summer of 69. Like, people feel that reminiscing, feel that, man, remember back in the day? So that when I mock it, it's so much funnier, because who the hell would reminisce about 1869? That's one of the darkest times in human history, because we had the Industrial Revolution, but at the same time, 5% of the entire American continent had just been killed by the American continent over a fight over freeing slaves. And many of which were very innocent people. The amount of people who actually owned slaves, or the amount of people that weren't brand new immigrants into the North was crazy. These people were dying innocently. And so there was just this horror, and it was like there wasn't, the concept of the germ hadn't really been flushed out at all. There was a horrible, there was just resentment. It was bad. I mean, I think it planted the seeds for World War I, to tell you the truth, because the pride that started coming after the World Fair, like the 1900, end of the 1890s, started getting more into like nationalism, militarism, alliances, all these things that led to World War I. And another reason I love Jordan Peterson is he turned me on to Carl Jung, the psychologist, whatever. And the concept of the shadow self. Like, for every good quality, there's a shadow quality. And it's all about understanding your own shadow qualities. And like on my Patreon page, I'll upload some audio of my brother and I, because I've gone through some dark times, even lately, but you just gotta burn through it like dead wood. And one of mine was envy. Okay, like a perfect example, nationalism is the shadow self of patriotism. Pride. Like, pride is a double-edged sword. Like, when you have pride in America, like I have patriotism, I have pride in America and what we've accomplished in the people that came before me that sacrificed for my freedom. But then the shadow self is nationalism, where it's like, we're better than you. As soon as you make it you weaponize it. And it's like that with admiration and envy. It's the same thing. But it all depends on how like where you're at mentally, or like how in control of yourself you are, or how capable of chaos you are. One of the reasons I think I'm overall a happy person and a successful person and a family-oriented person is because I don't pretend it's not there. And sometimes I go dark, but I try really hard, because it's so much easier to pretend it's not there. But it is. And it's like, the same quality that makes you look up to someone will make you envious of them and almost want them to fail for no reason. And the reason I know this is my shadow self is because they don't deserve it. Like if someone has something wonderful, for me it's never material. It's always career, and it's not the money aspect. It's the influence aspect. Like the having jokes being seen. You know, like I'll see a friend. Never a close friend. I've never really felt a lot of envy for people in my tribe. But like when I see someone who is funny, but has just this big influence, and I think, why not me? Now, the good version of that is admiration. Wow, what can I learn from this person? How did they do it? They must know something I don't. That's positive and productive, but envy is death. It's bad, you know, but it exists. And part of being a comedian is being in the world that acknowledges that. Jordan Peterson talked about how mythically the comedian would be the trickster. It's the person who can go between the worlds of man, God, and the underworld and survive. That's why comedians can be so mentally rattled, because it's not easy to go into the eye of darkness, because we have to. To be a good comedian, you have to accept just public ridicule, like bombing, and like understanding emotions that are dark and then making them funny and then putting them towards God or the gods or the heroes of the of society, you know. And that's a complicated concept, so if you want to learn more about it, listen to Jordan Peterson. He's brilliant at it. But like the simplest sketch or joke can come from such darkness. Like, okay, one of my favorite comedy sketches of all time was Joe Montana and Phil Hartman in a sketch about the guy with no internal monologue. And Phil Hartman was with this girl, and he's like, in his mind, he's like, man, I want to jump her bones. Is in his mind, he goes, would you like a beverage? And Joe Montana was like, I'm going to go upstairs and masturbate. And then his head would be like, I'm going to go upstairs and masturbate. That's a joke about doublespeak from like the book 1984. It's a book about deception. You know, it's a joke about a deep detachment from truth. But yet it's just funny and whimsical. Schmidt's Gay, one of my favorite sketches of all time with Adam Sandler and Chris Farley, is a joke about homophobia. It's a joke about, that's why I originally did Gay Town. It's revealing the obvious hypocrisy of not allowing gay people to have the same cultural things as straight people. Like, why isn't there a gay beer commercial? Like, where they objectify dudes' wieners and asses. That's the joke. The joke, and think about the darkness that like made that joke possible. One of my favorite jokes all time is Louis C.K.'s joke about the child asking why. Why, Dad? Well, because this guy, why? I don't know. Why? Because I didn't finish college. Why? Because your mother and I got pregnant. Why? Because we didn't use a condom. Why? Because I didn't really love myself. Why? I don't. And it's a question about man's search for meaning. That if you ask why enough, you have no idea about anything. It's about being dislodged from reality in this ether of algorithms and mystery and being lost. And it's so funny because it's rooted in that. And that's why comedians jump levels, because we have to understand that which makes us monsters, but then relate it to the world of man, and then also be able to somehow pull it into the archetypes of our myths and our gods and our heroes. And that takes a fucking toll. And yeah, that's enough about that. All right, here's something else. Yeah, so I just started riffing on this Bob Dylan idea. I'm starting to work on a Bob Dylan impression. If any of you guys have any ideas of how I can make this funnier, email me at whydidn'ttheylaugh@gmail.com. I love your emails. By the way, after the last podcast, I've had some of the most beautiful, wonderful emails I've ever gotten. So thank you for all your support and love and wonderfulness. And I have a bunch of comedy dates always coming up. Hugepianist.com. You can also buy handcrafted beer coasters made by yours truly on that website. And my Twitter at Owen Benjamin, Instagram, you know how to find me. It's all the same. But okay, tell me how you think I can make Bob Dylan funnier. All right, so check this out. Dylan is this great songwriter that I do love, but he doesn't speak either. He's like, what the fuck is that? This is Bob Dylan singing one of my songs. What do you now do? What did I do? Why won't you talk to me? I'm not fucking joking. We just woke up and there's you gotta fucking know about pride. So anyway, how many roads must a man walk down before you go? You can make. I think he did invent rap. Guys in the basement mixing up a minute and I'm on the basement thinking about the government. Man in the drink still bent down, laying off things, got a bad time, once again, paid off, coming out again, something in. Like, that's rap. They culturally appropriated it from us. This is not the crowd for those jokes. I'm just so, like San Fran, New York, LA, those would kill, but you guys are like, I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about, bro. Which is great. It means you're better to be around, but it's not like a pain that needs roasting in your life. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Why are you so mad about that shit? You got it. There's a world beyond Clifton Park. Doesn't know many downs, mountains, and wondering. It's like, dude, you're being annoying. No shit. Sounds crazy. All right, anyway. All right, I'm wrapping this up. All right, so yeah, if you have any ideas for that, because I think it's so funny how he sings. He sings like a bumblebee. And another shadow of self emotion is rage. There's a fine line between rage and passion. Passion's great. Yelling can be great. Attacking can be helpful. But rage is the dark part of that. Rage comes from insecurity, narcissism. You know, the desire to change the world to fit you and not the other way around, where you should fit the world. But passion and commitment to greatness is an ideal, is a virtue. And it's the same sword, you know? And I think that like here's me, I'm about to completely reprimand the crowd. For those of you who've seen me live, there's a bunch of different versions of this that I've done, but I tell the crowd to treat me like I'm a real musician and to clap when I tell them to, and so like part of it is that when I announce a song that they should act like, oh my God, he's gonna play it. And this crowd, because I did a 90-minute show, but I think they got drunk. They got like pretty drunk that they just kept going so big with the emotions that I reprimanded them. But I never had rage. It was all passion, and I did it in a way that allowed me to be ironic and funny. But the commitment to the energy is why it was funny. So, but I've never done this exact thing before. I've never told the crowd they're bad at sex. Let's try this out. This next song, I promised someone very special I would never play it again. No, you're not mad. No, you guys are like, no, just fucking make it subtle. Are you guys all terrible at fucking? Like, subtle at first. Bill, don't start with doggy style. Go around the queen a bit. Fucking get Eminem to take her hood off on her own. If that doesn't make sense to you, you suck at fucking. Jesus. Okay, let's do it again. I told them they sucked at fucking. Because it's true, I'm starting to realize that some people really don't understand sex. Like, it's just literally like, how quick can you get your dick in there? And how fast can you pump it? And then end. And like, that's crazy. And it's the same with like you can tell in conversation or in emotion or in that, if someone doesn't understand build up. And the Eminem thing, I was talking, like I did a joke earlier about Eminem, wearing the hood, and I compared it to a clitoris. Here's another quick thing, and then I'll wrap it up here. That's why I have pride in this Sarah's ability to drink. She has not been a problem. She literally just blacked out and just went. And now she's like, all right, time for the closer. Like, that's amazing. She's a small woman. Okay, you're a big old fat girl. What do you want me to say? I don't fucking know what you want. I'm not small. Okay, you're fucking huge. What's the right answer? All right, so here we go. Yeah, that's one of the problems that men face is there's no right answer. So I don't care. I'm in control of my shadow self, so I'll just say what's real. Like, what should I possibly say? I was giving this girl a compliment because a woman fell asleep in the show because she was hammered and then woke up and was fine. And so I was pointing out like how great that was. Like, look, she can get that hammered, and she was tiny. And I was like, she's a small girl and can still handle booze. And she was like, I'm not small. And I'm like, then you're a big fat fuck. Like, what possible thing should men say? Just never speak? Because that's not happening. And here's the close. Thank you so much, Owen, Benjamin. You guys are all brass. The reason I showed that close is because I want people to understand that people like it. They like being told the truth. And what truth is different to each person. And it is subjective. But people can tell when you're lying. Especially if you're talking by yourself on a stage for 90 straight minutes, eventually they're going to figure out if you're a charlatan or not. And that's why some of these Netflix specials and YouTube clips, the overwhelming reaction is 0 stars, thumbs down. There's some of the biggest comedy specials on Netflix got like a 0.5 star. The people hated it. But it doesn't matter because that voice represents the voice of the Hollywood elite. And they don't care what the people think because the cognitive dissonance is so drastic in their minds that they've demonized 95% of America instead of facing the reality that maybe they don't relate to America. And it's not about being smart or stupid. It's not about being good or bad. It's not about being talented or not talented. It's about the ability of being honest about your surroundings. Like, look at me. The Hollywood elite does not want me. They don't. They think my comedy isn't edgy. Or, want to know what edgy is? It's going for the laugh. At this point in life, being edgy is to not preach about politics and just do your goddamn job and be a comedian. That's edgy. Complaining about Donald Trump for 60 straight minutes is not brave. It's not edgy. In fact, it's the way to fit in. It's conformity. A true liberal like me, liberal means open-minded. And if you're an actual liberal, you're open-minded to conservative ideas. Everything cannot possibly be answered by liberalism or like the party of liberals. You can't want perpetual change for all aspects of your life. You will never be able to have a life worth living. It's constant change. You can't also have complete conservatism. You can't have no change. There has to be a balance between order and chaos. It's a beautiful dance. It's like the balance in genders of male and female. It's a beautiful thing. When you get rid of the concept of gender and the concept of dance, the concept of conflict and order, and you just keep people in this cortisol-addicted, horrifying state of lack of self, lack of identity, you're giving them a life that is not worth living because they're not happy. That's one of the reasons I left LA. Because the people I idolized, all they did is complain. All they did is sit in their little room. And the truly free people, there was a few, there's some. There's legends in LA. I miss a lot of aspects of LA. That's my envy side. It's there. It's always there. But like that reality is not fun. Of being like everyone else is wrong except me. Everyone else. And if you question certain science, they call you a science denier. I'm just going to say this and then I'll end this because this is very, very important. I am very, very into science. The entire concept of science is based on denying it. Skepticism is the root of all good science. There's another podcast I've been listening to that's really good. It's called You're Not That Smart. And there's this whole episode called The Half-Life of Knowledge. And I already knew this, but he did a great job explaining it. Like there's in each type of science, there's an accepted amount of information that isn't true. But it's not because it's corruption or manipulation, which is what we see now a lot. You know, and nutrition and a lot of these things. Like the food pyramid is exactly wrong. You shouldn't eat mostly bread. That was bullshit and that was because of money. But like when you go to medical school, they will tell you that a good chunk of what you're learning will be completely different in 4 years. It's part of knowledge. It's called the half-life of information. We're like every 7 years in like psychology or every 14 years in physics, half of everything they know will be different. And that is good because it means you're learning. Like Newton was, like Einstein learned from Newton. And then, you know, it just keeps going. And people, you have to accept that sometimes things are wrong. And that's the only way for science to just keep narrowing its focus until it actually comes out with a breakthrough that's brilliant and amazing and life-changing. When you deny the criticism of science, you halt growth. And it's important for us to tell the truth. Because if not, we're sitting ducks. We're sitting ducks for a takeover. Like Blockbuster Video. They were denying the reality that they were overcharging for late fees. People didn't need to get in the car and go to them anymore. They were denying reality so that Netflix just ate them, right? And they never came back. They're done. Blockbuster was on in 3 corners in every city in the entire country. Blockbuster. You never thought for a second that thing was ever going to go under, right? But it's the corruption of power and the assumption that it'll never end is why we don't keep our focus. And it's the assumption that this freedom is just going to be here forever. But if you don't live a life that constantly reaffirms the ethics and the principles that got us our personal freedom, it'll go. And it has gone. Read history. It has gone. So the reason I'm preaching this is because it's required to keep our amazing and fortunate and unbelievable way of life. Fossil fuels are a complex issue. Are you a denier? Fossil fuels definitely cause global warming. Global warming is definitely bad. Now, after that, debate. There's debate. There's debate on all of it. There's a debate on the extensiveness of it, what we should do, what we could have done 40 years ago with nuclear power that we didn't because of the government regulations. What the market has shown us with solar power, like what we can learn from that. How many billions of people fossil fuel pulled out of poverty and gave them a life worth living, and now we have to face reality that we're burning too much shit. But don't think for a second that your Skidmore education is on the back of oil. That the Industrial Revolution was fueled on oil, and we still live on oil, and our food comes from oil. Mechanized farming is why, like, we don't need like all these people in the fields. They couldn't produce enough food for us. So when you're sitting in Swarthmore or one of these liberal arts colleges eating food that you're getting on pennies on the dollar of what they used to be, in buildings made from oil, money accumulated from oil, books that you have the free time to read because oil has mechanized your life. Understand that. And then when you criticize it and when you come up with policies, people are much more likely to listen when you acknowledge the reality that oil was a gift and that there are opportunities to go green, but it's not as black and white as people think. It's not good guy, bad guy. This is the right political party. This is the wrong political party. The reason it's framed that way is that so one political party can get more power. That's all it is. If they gave a shit about us, all they would be talking about is high fructose corn syrup. Our diet has led to the premature deaths of millions of people, a holocaust of fat. And it's from hormones that are overstimulated by sugar and processed sugar because our DNA is not capable of dealing with it, right? That's all they would focus on if they gave a shit about us, but they don't. They want trans bathroom legislation, has nothing to do with trans people. It only has to do with the accumulation of power. Know this. Because if you don't know that, we will just keep giving them power. And Republican, Democrat, there is no right side. Both sides are guilty of the accumulation of power over the individual. And they will not stop unless you stop them. And the only way to stop them is very simple. Be honest about what you see in the world. Be honest. Do you see KKK cross burnings on the street? Is that what you're witnessing? Because if not, maybe that's not the factor. That's all I'm saying. And I get proven wrong all the time. I have a half-life of my information as well. But I love it. I love being proved wrong because if I know that I have a notion that's false, I can't wait to abandon it. Because false ideology will hold you down. You will sink. And in my line of work, stand-up comedy seems like it's a narcissistic line of work, and in some ways it is. Social media can feel narcissistic. But that is the absence of self. When you're in that room, and if you're really good at it, you have to take the humiliation of a non-laugh, of feeling like an outsider, of an other, and you have to accept it and think, what do these people want? What is honest to me that is also honest to them? Where is our middle ground? And in that, the ego is death. In that, you develop skills where you can accumulate more knowledge and change your dogma and change your ideology and hope to find more people like you that want to know where they're wrong. There's people out there that if right now science proved that global warming isn't true, they would be angry. Don't you want the best for the globe? Or if Donald Trump turned out to be this tree-hugging, rights for all, guy, they would be mad. They wouldn't be able to accept it. Because their identity is defined by hate. And it's defined by agitation. And in order to face that shadow self, it causes so much pain that they refuse. And I got to witness that with the church when I was a kid. We knew our priest was a perv. We knew he was stealing, but it was too hard on some people to admit it because the connection to God and the connection to their dead ancestors was through this man. And I've seen with my own eyes how corruption can take good people and make them admit things that are false just because they don't want to question their own dogma because there's too much pain. Well, I live in pain. I've accepted my pain, and that's why I'm fucking good at comedy. And so subscribe to the podcast, support, because I'm indie, man. I'm indie now. I don't have a Hollywood team. I mean, I still have my manager who's awesome, who's crushing, the man. But I'm off the grid, man. I'm thousands of miles away from there. So if you want to help me and help spread good comedy that makes you laugh, and thoughts that you agree with, if you've ever watched late night TV and just kept flipping through and being like, all these guys are fucking assholes, support people that aren't. Because in the end of the day, it's about you guys and it's about what you want. Don't be tricked into being told what you want by people you don't agree with. Because that life isn't worth fucking living. All right. So patreon.com/WDTL. Please subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Owen Benjamin Comedy. Spread the word and comment. Tell people you like it. Show people that your fucking opinion matters. Look at my YouTube shit. 300 thumbs ups, 0 thumbs downs on a lot of shit. No one fucking cares. You throw up some of these clips that are fucking garbage. It's like all thumbs downs. Everyone's like, well, then everyone's in the KKK. No, maybe you fucking suck at comedy. All right. Much love.